Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. My name is Emily, but you can call me Ems. If you are new here, which a decent number of you are new here, you may not know that I am an Obod Druid and a Reclaiming Witch. I practice paganism and witchcraft in my everyday life as my religion. And today I would like to talk about a little something that has been really helpful for me in my practice coming out of my master's degree that I'm currently ongoing with. And that is book annotation. Annotating my pagan and witchcraft books as I am reading them in order to help me better make notes, as well as better reference the books afterwards, and helping me in my practice and pushing my practice forward using critical thinking. So I've actually been annotating my fiction books for a few years now, a little bit before I began my master's degree. However, learning how to take notes again in an academic setting with my master's degree that is ongoing, I have learned quite a few tips and tricks that I decided to try and apply to my pagan practice, my witchcraft practice, when I read these different books. This is all sparked because recently I finished the Druid grade of the Order of Bards, Ovates, and Druids, my little certificate right here of completion. I like to joke that I got Dave the Bard's signature the long way around. And Dave the Bard, if you do not know, is a pagan musician, and I've loved his work for a very long time, and he is the pen dragon, or the keeper of the sword, of my order of my Druid order. And he is one of the signatures and seals on this certificate of completion. And when I finished that, I knew that I wanted to continue in some kind of study for my practice, because I began OBOD in 2015 when I finished my religious studies degree, and I wanted to continue learning about different things, especially since I was I was already into for a few years at that point paganism and witchcraft, so I decided I would explore the Order of Bards, Ovates, and Druids and Druidry as a path. And all this time also being a reclaiming witch. More on that later if you're interested, or even if you're not interested, because this is my channel. But I wanted to continue my studies, etc. So I had this sort of craving to read some of the older witchcraft books like Stuart Farrer, Janet Farrer, and even Gerald Gardner, maybe even some Crowley eventually. I'm very interested in reading old occult and witchcraft books to understand where we are coming from, so that I can then look forward as a living tradition and how we're going to move forward as well. Eventually, I would like to read Triumph of the Moon by Ronald Hutton. He is I believe a professor of divinity at Gresham College. Correct me if I'm wrong in the comments. But that book is all about the modern paganism and how it has come to be, and Wicca, and how Wicca is the only religion that England has provided to the world, which is a very interesting concept. So this book is very dense and academic, and currently I'm not in the mood for more academic reading in my hobby time. However, reading with critical reading and nonfiction reading is still of interest to me, specifically in the witchcraft space. So this is where I've decided to take some of the things that I have learned through annotation for notes for my actual master's degree into these books. For example, I have done What Witches Do, A Modern Coven Revealed by Stuart Farrer, which I believe is from 1971. This is the edition from 1991, the 20-year anniversary, that does contain some updated stuff. Whenever I can get an updated anniversary edition that contains either commentary from the author themselves or from community members, that is really what I want. And that is also what's going on with Witchcraft Today by Gerald Gardner. This is the 50th anniversary edition. It was originally published in 1954, and this edition is from 2004. And it contains commentary from Ronald Hutton, as well as people like the pagans of the day, the well-known pagans of the day in 2004, including Judy Harrow, the person who ran Witchvox, that sort of thing. And I'm not quite finished yet. And by not quite finished yet, I mean I'm like halfway through the book. but I am definitely enjoying myself in reading this. It's fascinating. You can see I've got lots of tabs. But I thought it might be helpful for all of you if I talk to you a little bit about what I do when I annotate my books. First of all, what's annotation? Annotation basically just means noting, like putting a note in it. So whenever I'm annotating a book, let me try and find an example. Here we go. So I've got some highlights and I also write in the margins. That is a form of annotation. Not all annotation has to take that form, and I'll talk a little bit about how to annotate in library books later without making permanent marks. So what I use for annotation, first and foremost, I use a highlighter, or more specifically to me, I prefer mild liners. This currently I'm using a yellow mild liner, but I have lots of different mild liner colors. I just find these less harsh on the eyes, but highlighting I think is quite important, specifically to me, because it shows me exactly where in the passage I wanted to highlight or note or that struck me. Next is a pen for the actual annotation part. Currently I'm just using a Sarasa Clip 0.5 millimeter pen from Zebra. Great pen, love it. This is from their vintage color collection. And finally, the things that I use is sticky flags. So these are actually from Amazon. I'm not usually an Amazon shopper. However, I do purchase indie published books that were self-published on Amazon, and sometimes I need a few extra dollars to get the free shipping. I'll stick on a pack of these because I use these all the time. And I've got lots extra ready to go. And I also end up using them as bookmarks all the time. So I mentioned that annotation helps me with note taking. However, I don't actually take notes while I'm reading the text. What I do is I read through the book, do my highlights in my tabs, and then I come back to my tabs afterwards, after having read the book and rated it and whatnot, because I rate on my own experience and my own enjoyment levels at the end of reading the book. So I read it through first, make all my highlights, do all of my tabs, and then I come back and make my notes. So the first thing is that highlights and flags are something to come back to. That is the point of them. So whenever you're having a reaction to the text, you might feel a need to highlight. You do not always need to flag and highlight. However, because it is something you can practice and get better at, highlight what you feel speaks to you and flag it. And if when you go back through later, you can just take that flag out. No one will know. It's your book. Something that I like to do is categorize my flags by color. For example, in this book, I have 6 different colors. This example is just I have good line / commentary, fun facts, interesting, on magic and ritual, and then rituals, wording, invocations, etc., and then disagreements. That is what I have in this book, but then in a different book, I have a completely different system. This one I only had 4, and that was quotes, wording, concepts and exercises, and interesting or quite different concepts and ideas. So when I'm creating this right here, I'm actually doing it as I go. My first highlight, I highlight it, and then I think to myself, what is it about this that I'm highlighting? Is it just a really good wording, really good quote that I would like to go back to later or post on Instagram or things like that? Great. That means I need a quotes flag. So I'll pick a color, stick it on the page, then flip to the front of the page, front of the book, put it, write quotes. Then each time you're highlighting, you're kind of asking yourself, it doesn't need to be a big, long, why am I highlighting this? I must think and ponder for a while. It can just be like, oh, good quote. Great. Oh, that means quotes. Yep. And then you highlight it and go, oh, that was an awesome poem. I really would like to use that in a ritual. Oh, ritual wording. I can do that as a flag. These things that you're asking yourself and saying to yourself while you're actually engaging with the text, these are the things that we are highlighting and flagging. If you are really unsure what to actually highlight, think of it as the highlights are your reaction to the text. This is when something like really strikes you, whether it is like, oh, that's really different, or oh, like that's where this comes from, or wow, that's just so poignant, or even, oh, I don't agree with that at all. These are all things that you can highlight, and these can all become flags. Just as highlighting is a reaction to the text, annotations, your actual notes in the margins, is your conversation with the text or with the author or what the author is portraying and saying to you. This can be literally anything. Like I have done annotations as little as lol, and I've done them as much as like lines down the side, and then I had to put an arrow to the bottom, and I've got like a whole paragraph going on because I had a lot of thoughts in the moment. Doing that, or pulling out a sticky note, writing a whole paragraph, putting it into my book. Sometimes those happen. Usually it does not for me. Sometimes it is just like, oh, that's interesting. For example, in Witchcraft today, there is a section that discusses like, oh, here, that's a big section. So this one is where there's a lot of this that has history that is very outdated history, but I wanted to remind myself in context that they were based on the theories of Margaret Murray. So I put much of the history presented here are based on the theories of Margaret Murray, who was a respected historian at the time. Her theories are now not considered true or current in the canon of history, but this was a theory at the time. Something I want to remind myself of, especially if I'm going to review this book and just say, oh, it's bad history. No, it's not bad history. It's outdated history. There's a difference. So that is sort of things that I might be putting that's really long. And sometimes it's just, lol. These are the things that you're having in conversation with this text. And there could be really deep thoughts. There could be really surface level thoughts. Just practice and you will get there. It helps so much with critical thinking, especially when you're like investigating why you're having a negative reaction to something. So like, for example, with the history section, I was having a negative reaction because I follow Ronald Hutton. I know a lot of the current theories on the history of paganism, witchcraft, heathenism, like from the heaths, that sort of thing. Like I watch a lot of this content. I read like a lot of things in that realm. So I have a very strong negative reaction to the history in this book. So I investigated in myself, why am I having a negative reaction? Oh, it's outdated history. Was it current at the time? Yes, it was current at the time. So that critical thinking, bringing things into context is very important to me personally when I'm reading these books, especially when I would consider historical witchcraft books. And I know historical sounds a little weird when there are people who were born in like 1954 and 1971 who are still alive. In fact, my mom was born between these two books, and she'd be like, "You're calling me historical? How dare you?" It's just they are our history. So I think the context is really important there. When I first started annotating, one of the things I had a lot of trouble with was actually physically highlighting and writing in my books. I have an English degree as well as religious studies. I double majored in English and religious studies. Boy, howdy, does it feel like a cardinal sin of bookishness to write and highlight in your books. But please, please, please listen when I tell you. They are your books if they're your books, if you own them. They are your books. You own them. You can do anything you want to those books. The authors have already received their commissions from your purchase. The shops have already gotten everything from it. This is your book. Use it however you would like and however helps you with being in conversation with that text. Trust me, the authors will love that you're doing that. They want you to engage with their text. They want you to take something away from it. There's a reason they wrote the book. Writing in your books is okay. And choosing to not write in your books is also okay. And with that, I want to give you some tips on annotation in library books, or similarly, if you own the book and you still feel like you do not want to write in your book. Similar things that you're going to need, instead of a highlighter, you're going to get regular sticky notes, or they do have these longer sticky notes with lines on them, like kind of like a notebook with a sticky top. Those are the things you're going to want to get, as well as these sticky flags to still put in order. at the beginning of the book, instead of what I do with sticking this right here, you would put a sticky note, put these flags on the sticky note, and write on the sticky note your categories. When you are in the section, instead of highlighting, use the colored flag to mark the line where it begins. And if you would like to, you can also mark it again where it ends. And then instead of writing in the margins, you're going to write on your sticky notes and put them on the page. This way, when you go back to your book, if you own it, you can go back and go, yes, and go through just as I would. But you just have it on a sticky note, and it might be harder to find exactly where the quote begins and ends, but that is just up to you. When you are making your notes later in a library book, when you're going through, tab by tab, make your notes as you go, remove the tabs in the sticky notes. You can even reuse the tabs in this way. You can restick them to your little plastic piece and reuse them as long as they still have stick. And then you can return your library book and you've had the experience of being able to go through, read it, then make your notes. And that brings me to reviewing the actual tabs. What I like to do is go in order that I have gotten the tabs. There are multiple different ways you can decide to organize your notes, and that will affect the way you go through your tabs. So the two examples that I have, there might be others as well, is to go in order that it appears in the text. So like if it's a pink and then a blue and then a purple, I would go pink, blue, purple. I'd go in the order that it's in the text. And I open my Book of Shadows or notebook, I write in my Book of Shadows, and I use 2 different colored pens. That's just my preference, but I put the quote from the book, including the page number, in one color. That's the dark color here. And then I make my additional reaction or notes in a different color. In this case, it is this blue color here. And then I go straight through the book, front to back, making all of my notes like that. The other way is to do it by flag type. Decide what order you would like things to appear in your book. And then you can do it by, for example, quotes, then wording, then rituals, that sort of thing, whatever order you would like them to appear in your book. And also this way, when you read the book all the way through, because it can take a while to read a book sometimes, and then you do all your notes at once, it means it's all in one spot in your book. You are not flipping through multiple pages or, God forbid, multiple journals, because I've been there flipping through multiple journals to find the notes on the same book. This way, it stays in the same notebook, or in my Book of Shadows in this case. Reading and annotating in this way can help with reading comprehension as well as topic absorption. I myself am very likely dyslexic. I was never diagnosed because I was in full French immersion, so it was always, well, it's your second language. And then I went back to English and they're like, well, you didn't have an English class for so long. So I don't know, but I'm a slow reader and sometimes it's difficult to absorb information. But when I am stopping, engaging with a piece, thinking this through as I go, it's a little slower to read. However, I am actually absorbing this information and then I'm reabsorbing it or reminding myself of it when I'm writing my notes afterwards. So this reading is one level. The highlighting is another level. The thinking it through to pick a flag, a whole other level. The annotation is another level. And then going back through and making notes, another level. You've got like 5 levels of engagement with the text and therefore more levels of comprehension, as well as more pathways created in your brain to remember these things. I'm not a scientist. I don't know if that's actually like pathways in the brain true, but it feels right to me because I feel like I'm getting so much more out of my witchcraft and pagan books when I'm engaging with them in this way. But how does all of this actually help my practice? It allows me to engage critically with other paths within witchcraft and paganism, as well as my own path. It lets me re-examine my own thoughts on similar topics over and over again, getting new depth and getting into things. And the more I come across the same concept, the more I think about it, absorb it, go deeper and deeper, and I experience the same idea in new ways all the time. And that enriches my personal practice and gives me a way to outlet that and a way to engage with it in a mundane space such as reading versus only doing ritual, what have you. It gives me another way to experience my craft, my path. I hope you guys have enjoyed watching. And if you are also an annotator, give me your tips and tricks down in the comments below and tell me what you think of my tips and tricks. Have you tried some of them before? Have they helped? Were they, not as helpful for you? I think it's good to know because each person is different, especially with how they learn. And the more that we engage together and learn new ways of learning, it can enrich all of our lives. Thank you so much for watching today. I hope you enjoyed yourself. Please hit the like button and subscribe if you would like to see more from me. I make crafty and the craft related content on this channel, as well as anything that piques my fancy. And I will see you next time.